Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you very much for joining us as we get ready for a great show tonight. William Warwick IV will join us talking about the Phobos Enigma and UFOs coming up momentarily. But first, we're going to say hello to each and every one of you as we have Race Fan in the gold medal position, Eternity Eternal with the silver, Tim Mothman in his goatee with a bronze medal tonight. Hi there, Robert Lamoth and Necessary Dialogue, Karen in the Woo Train. Mel WD-40 is here lubing up his new wrench because you always want a wrench nice and smooth, so Mel has lubed it up beautifully. Bar Madison, how you doing? Little Timmy James, good to see you, buddy. Frankie B, thanks for coming on in. Hi there, Kitty Caddywhack. And who's next on our list? Ethanol, good to see you. Major Lee, how you doing? Kathy Evans, nice to see you. And Mama Catherine, I love you. I hope you have a great time listening to the show tonight, Mama Catherine. You're the best. You really are. Scrolling on down, let us say hello to Road Flare and number 25 in your program, starting at left wing from Stockholm, Sweden, Lars Jansson. Lars will be signing autographs after the show. Line up to the left of the studio, if you don't mind, to the left of the studio. Thomas Rock, JMJ12, Hillbilly Herb, thank you for joining us as we say hello next to S. Vermet, Dragonfly, Phineas on X. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you as we continue on with our roll call. There's Pam Harris. Thank you for coming on in. Just another guy named Harry. And Xanos is here. Xanos will be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the right of the studio, if you don't mind, to the right of the studio. Algaray over on Twitch, 1,200 Japping Jacks in 8 minutes to warm up for tonight's show. Phil the Stalker, how you doing? Fast Hemi, nice to see you. Millennium, my man, thanks for coming on in. And there's I'm Hardcore over on X. What in Tarnation, how are you tonight? Marty Burback, thanks for coming on in. Rock and Rory, good to see you. As we continue on with our roll call. Hi there, Angela Thompson. Paramarv, thanks for joining us. Little Cam over on, he's on YouTube tonight. Yeah. 500 sit-ups, 18 minutes. Stomach muscles are jacked. He's got an 8-pack right now. 8-pack. Scrolling on down. Let's say hello next to nobody. We're caught up. Gosh, I'm not supposed to be done this early. Remind all of you the super chat is open. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. Why? Well, it supports what we do. And we're pretty good at what we do. We really are. So you guys get ready to have some fun. We're going to have some fun. And we're going to make this happen in about 1 minute time. So let's just sit back, catch our breaths, relax, and get ready. Hi, Dave Tiger Williams. He'll drop the gloves for you. And, yeah, college basketball has started. Yeah, I don't get that. Let's hit this right here. Hello and welcome to the radio and podcast side of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We are preparing for tonight's show in just over a minute's time. Well, maybe less. We'll see. And tonight's guest is William Warwick. We're going to be talking about the Phobos Enigma and UFOs. It's going to be a good one, so make sure you're warmed up. We are in roll call right now on the YouTube side, saying hello to JMJ12, J. Paul, Jerry Carter. Lots of J's right there. Look at that. Triple J's right there. Remember Double J, Jeff Jarrett? I loved him as a wrestler. Really did. Except he stole the honky tonk man's move by smashing the guitar over somebody's head. River Dog, how you doing? Good to see you. We're coming in 25 seconds, and then the music will start. Juliana McGill, nice to see you, my beautiful friend. And don't forget the Super Chat is open. As well, don't forget to shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, High Buckethead. We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag. So make sure you check it on out and get some for yourself, and then send us a photo. Throw those horns up, everybody. Let's rock. Mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world. This, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swing as well. You can follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Tonight's show is brought to you by Jive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Jive Charities today. You can find them on our website. We're racking for an awesome show tonight. William Warwick is going to join us momentarily to talk about the Phobos effect and UFOs. Make that the Phobos Enigma and UFOs. That's the one. Then in hour number 3, Swamp Dweller will kick things off. Little Timmy James will be here for the UFO report. Then it's Dave 101 night, as well as the weird news of the week. So let's get right to it here. William Warwick is an award-winning documentarian and filmmaker, producer, writer, and inventor. His work has been featured on Ancient Aliens, Aliencon, ABC News, and many other media outlets. William is publishing a new book, The Phobos Enigma, Evidence of Artificial Nuclear Pulse Detonations on Phobos, and has kindly given SOR an exclusive first look at what is going to become, hopefully, a #1 bestseller in the UFO community. William is also part of a documentary, Phoenix Incident, which delved into the Phoenix Lights UFO case. He also has information to share about Tic Tacs, UFOs, and how they operate. He's the founder and CEO of Ghost Development, Inc. Let's bring him on right now. William Warwick, welcome to Spaced Out Radio for the first time. How are you?
What a great intro. Great to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm very curious because when I was checking out your bio before the show here, the Phoenix Lights, of course, it was 28 years ago and a week tonight that the Phoenix Lights happened. And just overall thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's still a lot of information about the events that transpired that night that the public is still not aware of. It's still an ongoing investigation for us, and my colleague Greg Black, Greg Schwartz, and we filed some Freedom of Information Acts to get some information on the A10s that that we believe were scrambled that night in order to intercept one of the UFOs, and that investigation is ongoing. The totality of what happened that evening is still not, even after all these years, the American public is still pretty much in the dark about what really happened that night. And hopefully, in time, we'll be able to tell that story as well, and we'll get some clarity on that.
Well, the funny part about it is I actually interviewed a paranormal investigator named Dave Spinks, who actually was stationed at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base when that happened.
Really,
Yeah,
really, I like that.
he
I would
was
like to get. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
he was stuck in the cafeteria and they put the blinders down as they were scrambling the A-10s, which didn't make sense to me because the A-10 is such a slow moving jet. I thought they would scramble F-15s because there was a big strike fighter unit in Phoenix at Davis-Monthan, and they didn't. They went with the A-10s.
Well, the official story is that the visiting Air National Guard unit from Maryland was there, Operation Snowbird, I believe they called it, to do a kind of, I don't know if it was an annual exercise or not, but basically to do training in Davis-Monthan. The interesting thing about that, though, was that they, and I don't know if this was planned or not, but the exercise began, I think, if I recall, maybe a week or two before the Phoenix Lights, and it conveniently ended on March 14th, which of course is the night after the Phoenix Lights. So before anyone could ever figure out what's going on or even question anybody, the Air National Guard members were already on their way home back to their home base in Maryland. So the scuttlebutt for us is, the official story of the A-10s dropping the flares, or blaming that particular A-10 squadron for dropping the flares, was the official story. But in reality, if you look at the flight logs information, which we're still trying to get Freedom of Information Act information about that, it seems pretty clear that the visiting guard unit was on the ground maybe an hour and a half, 9:30 time frame, and the flare drop was clearly at 10:20 p.m. So it wasn't the Maryland Air Guard that were asserting that dropped the flares. We're asserting that it was either Craig Button and or possibly Ambulance Svoboda, because if you look at how flight operations would work, if those were the aircraft that were already fueled up and ready to go, and let's just assume that the home base with Davis-Monthan had Captain Button and Ambulance Svoboda, maybe on base or on call or something like that, then what would have happened is the Air National Guard people would have come back from their missions and landed, and they would probably need a little bit of time to recycle, meaning get them fueled up and ready to go back out. The pilots might have been tired, et cetera, et cetera. So the more likely situation is that those guys had already been stood down, and that they probably likely called up the local guys, which would have been theoretically Captain Button and potentially Ambulance Svoboda, or it could have been anybody else at Davis-Monthan. However, the issue here is, of course, as we know now, is that just a few weeks after the Phoenix Lights incident on March 13th, on April 1st, April 2nd, we have Craig Button, who allegedly just took off in his aircraft and disappeared. And many people don't know that only about 8 weeks after that, his trainer, Ambulance Svoboda, also from Davis-Monthan, also crashed under, I would say, mysterious circumstances, and both of those deaths should be investigated as homicides, I believe.
Wow, that's going real deep. I hadn't even heard about that, but I do have to ask you, and I would be remiss if I didn't, William. Did you hear last week where Dr. Stephen Greer came out and said that he's responsible for the Phoenix Lights? He was sitting on top of a mountain with a general and was summoning them in. So he is responsible for making that happen.
I have not heard that assertion.
What's your thoughts on hearing that for the first time?
Well, um, hmm. So he's asserting that he was with the general and he was able to summon them.
Yes. So he was heading to Phoenix, and then he was, to meet with this general to talk about UFOs. And they were going to use this special technology that nobody knew about. And then on the plane, he was summoning down the craft. They landed. He goes, meets the general. They go up on this mountaintop where this allegedly happened, looking over Phoenix. Now, the funny part about it is it's coming out 28 years later. Why would it take 28 years for this to happen? I mean, to me, it's ludicrous. It really is. And it's full of ego and smite. You know what I'm saying?
You know, I don't really engage myself with the UFO quote unquote community that much anymore because there's a lot of that, and I just try to strictly stick to the facts and the evidence and scientific method, so to speak. Um, so there's a lot of ego involved and that kind of thing, absolutely. But as far as the statement is concerned, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but no matter who said it, right? The first thing I would be concerned about is whether or not that person was being set up by this alleged general to have this alleged experience, so that the person could basically believe that this was a real event and that it was a UFO and create a narrative that was basically false. So, um, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Um, my concern would be, and I'll give you another example, like Bob Lazar, right? And I believe Bob's a genuine guy, and I've bought aerogels from him and materials and stuff, and I've followed his work and Element 113 and all that for many years, and absolutely some of that stuff is plausible. However, the most plausible explanation of what happened with Bob Lazar is that he was set up to provide information to him, knowing that he was the kind of person that would probably reveal it, not out of a nature of espionage, but just that he was the kind of guy that might uh, on principle alone want to share that information, right? And if he was psychologically profiled and chosen to be a person that they would set up to do that, then what you do is you basically give that person just enough information to have other intelligence agencies follow what they call a red herring. So that would be a brilliant plan, especially during that period of time when we were kind of still in the Cold War. And if I wanted the Russians to spend a whole bunch of money on something that was not real, then I would have a guy like Bob Lazar be set up. And don't get me wrong, there may have been elements of his story that were 100% true, but he could have been part of a counterintelligence operation unwittingly, which was used to make the Russians spend a whole bunch of time and money on investigating and researching an element that was not going to lead anywhere. Now, the interesting counterpoint to that, of course, is that the Russians did eventually develop isotopes of element 115, excuse me, I think it was.
Yes.
So, you know, the interesting thing about that is if that was a counterintelligence operation, it didn't work because they developed element 115 and we don't know what particular properties might have with it. But you see, so it's a very murky world when you get into the UFO area because you got all of these different groups who are trying to put out different narratives, each with their own particular motivations, right? So you really have to sift through the chaff to find the truth a lot of times, and it takes a lot of work. And even
What?
if you do all of the work, you may not actually get the truth you're looking for,
Oh, William, you are so right. You are so right. The truth is out there somewhere watching us, and
Yeah.
we just figure out where the hell it is. That's for sure. What made you get interested in this subject matter?
Oh, well, yeah, that's easy. So on March 12th, 1997, which is the night before the Phoenix Lights, I basically got a close encounter of the third kind myself. I reported it on my CB radio. Back then, they had CB radios, and um, cell phones were just kind of a new thing, and they're really expensive. So most communication for commercial was just through CB radios, which is interesting. I tell people, if you've ever seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I was that guy. you know,
Really?
I was that guy. Yeah. And I got fired from my job too and everything. So a couple of days later, I got fired from my job, and I was working my way through college at the time. And so it really set my whole life path on a completely different journey. And me being the kind of person I was just like, well, if this is the effect that it's going to have on my life, then I'm going to figure out what the hell happened and get to the bottom of it, before I die, kind of deal. So that's
Dude,
that's really
you
yeah.
have to
All
tell
because
us that story. You have to tell us that story.
Oh, okay. So I was about 26 years old. I was working I was working my way through college. I was going over to a friend's house actually at OG Union University to look at a situation his dad was having, and he said, you got a business card. So I went out to my truck to get a business card, and on my way back in, I paused for a moment at the top of the guy's steps because that was actually the anniversary of my grandfather's death a few years earlier, and so I just paused and I was looking up at the stars of Orion's belt and just having a reminiscent moment. It was a clear sky, pretty much unlimited visibility, not too cold out, and I was in an area called, if you're familiar with Norfolk, Virginia, the Norfolk Naval Base. I was in a civilian section, but surrounded basically by the Norfolk Naval Air Station. So um, I was I just stopped for maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds maybe before I was about to walk in the door just to look at the three stars of Orion's belt. And to give you a little bit of a background, I was in the Civil Air Patrol, so I was a senior member of the Civil Air Patrol. So part of my training actually was that I have a photographic memory, eidetic memory, and so I memorized the entire Jane's Encyclopedia of Aircraft, the military one and the civilian one, when I was a kid. I was a plane buff. I was an aerospace buff, I guess you would say, right? So um, so I was very well versed and trained in air operations and search and rescue operations. I was with the Taunton Air Squadron in Massachusetts at the time. Um, I'm sorry, a few years before that, before I moved to Virginia, excuse me. And so basically, what happens is I'm looking up at the three stars of Orion's belt, and I know I'm in a military area, which is called a terminal control area, TCA, restricted area, right? You can't just fly any aircraft into that area. It's probably one of the most restricted areas in the whole country because you have more nuclear weapons in that area. You got the Norfolk Naval Base, you got the aircraft, the submarines. It's the biggest military base in the world. So I knew that if there was anything anomalous in the airspace that shouldn't be there, that it would bring attention. So I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the three stars of Orion's belt, and all of a sudden I see from left to right, I see each one of the stars blink out. And it's a clear sky, there's no clouds, there's no nothing. And it caught my attention. I was like, what is that? So I'm looking up because any aircraft that's operating at night like that has to have anti-collision lights on. See, so it's an FAA law. Even if it's not at night, that you have to have your anti-collision lights on. So I knew right off the bat that whatever I was witnessing was something that was unusual, right? So, but at this point in my sighting, I couldn't get a shape, I guess you could say. I just knew that something was passing in front of the stars, and it was blinking each one out, individually as it passed in front of it. So I'm like, okay, this is, in my mind, I'm thinking, this is really cool. This is curious. What's going on? And actually, the first thought that jumped into my mind, if you've ever seen the movie Escape from L.A. or Escape from New York with like Snake Plissken back in the '80s.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I forget, I think it was the opening scene. They come in on a on an air glider, an unpowered air glider, and they land on top of the building. So that's the first thing I thought was like, I was like, okay, this is cool. This is Navy SEALs. They're practicing an air glider attack on the base, right? Because that's the only type of aircraft, quote unquote, that you could have that would not be required to have anti-collision lights on it, right? And I could kind of make out that it was sort of a chevron or a boomerang shape or something like that, right? So I thought automatically, I'm thinking, okay, that's really cool, you know what I mean? I'm like, that must be what it is. And I made that determination in like 2 seconds, right? 3 seconds, whatever. Now, just as I'm thinking, okay, it's Navy SEALs and a hang glider, all of a sudden I kind of lose it. It does this maneuver, and the only way I could describe it, because it didn't have any lights on, so I'm kind of seeing an outline of it, so to speak, right? So I don't really have a way to define it, but it appeared to, if you've ever seen a maple leaf pod that falls, and it's kind of a chevron or boomerang shape, and it falls and it spins kind of on its own axis as it falls. That seemed to be what it did. Now, right off the bat, if you know anything about aerodynamics, that's not how a hang glider works. You know, actually, that would be on any aircraft that would be what we would call a flat spin, and you would die. So, but I wasn't thinking flat spin because it just didn't seem like a normal maneuver. So I lost it for a couple of seconds, and then all of a sudden, this object appears above the roof line of my buddy's house, my buddy's father's house that I was going to do the plumbing work on. And when I was able to reacquire it, so to speak, it went from what I would have assumed to be somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 feet to treetop level, or I would say housetop level, in like 3 seconds, 4 seconds, maybe something like that. Just an incredible speed, to have been that high up in the sky, to have been capable of blocking the 3 stars of Orion's belt, and then basically 10 feet above this guy's ridgeline on his house. So at that point I was like, okay, that's not a hang glider. And then my mind's kind of racing to try and figure out, what could it be, right? Like what am I witnessing here? So then what happened is it was above the house, up kind of in my left 45 degree, off to my 45 degree angle. And then I notice it's moving very slowly, and it's a huge object. I don't really have a defined shape of it yet, but there's a huge black something in the sky, right? Again, no lights on it. No lights. And as it's passing over the top of the house, there's some street lights, and there's a street that goes, Rogers Avenue goes all the way down to Hampton Boulevard, and it's lined with street lights and high pressure selenium lights, and there's a glow coming off of them. And this is still March, so the trees hadn't really bloomed that much yet, so there wasn't very many leaves to obstruct anything, except for the pine trees. So boy, I haven't thought about this in a long time. So at this point in my experience and my sighting, it's basically perpendicular to me, right? And at this point, it's I can now actually see part of the outline and the shape of it, because the street lights are actually reflecting off the bottom of it, right? So now at this point, the object that I think that I'm seeing looks like a big rectangle with like a dome on the bottom of it, right? But that's only because I'm looking at it from a side profile. So I'm looking at a boomerang or a chevron shape from the right side, if it looked like the wing, but it's not a wing, right? And from a side view, if you were looking at it from the side, it's like 35 feet from front to back, 25 feet tall, and with a dome-like structure that came down maybe a couple feet below on the bottom. So,
Will, hold that
yeah,
thought. We're
sure.
going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. We're going to continue with this incredible story of his first encounter with a UFO. William Warwick is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We're off to a hot start. We're going to keep this rolling right through the next couple of hours. We'll be right back for the second half right after this. All right, we are clear. William, good start, man. Good start.
Right on. Right on. No, you know, it's funny. I haven't told that story in a long time. I apologize. I'm a little, I have to think about it a little bit.
Doesn't matter. We're going to continue it going here. That's the stuff I love right there. That's
me too. Me too. You know, when I investigate these things, you know, people say, "Oh, the witness's story is the most unreliable," and to an extent, it can be, but in reality, it's the most. And I don't want to say accurate data, but it's the most. What's the word I'm looking for? It can be some of the most accurate data. Do you know what I mean? Because if you go to the original witness, you get the raw, unfiltered version of the story. You see what I'm saying? If you ever do sociology, you know, impacts or studies, whenever someone tells a story and then another person tells a story, it always changes, right? So, so for me, I always look at it from the standpoint of you get the eyewitness testimony, you know, the direct eyewitness testimony, and that is always your most valuable tool in assessing whether or not something is true. And if you get enough of it, you can put the picture together, right? And that's what I did with the Phoenix Lights incident. I held a conference and I invited all the witnesses that could come to tell the story, and I got much more, you know, details than you get in the media and from reading other people's version of the story. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, even like what we're doing now, like there could be things that we talk about that, you know, again, every time I tell the story, you know, sometimes I remember something or I have a perspective, like, because I'm 53. This happened when I was 26. You know what I mean? Like this was like the internet had just started, cell phones were just becoming a thing. You know what I mean? So much has changed since then. So, you know, I see things differently now than I did obviously back then. What do you know when you're 26? Nobody, you don't know jack shit. You know what I mean?
I hear you there.
So the yeah, but and that's actually what led to it's a funny story because my wanting to know how the craft was constructed led to my wanting to pursue my own nanotechnology career and actually file some of the patents that I filed. So it was a weird sort of watershed moment in my life that put me on a path towards a totally different, you know, life path. You know what I mean? Totally.
Absolutely. Well, let's finish that story when we come back from the break here in about 2 minutes 45 seconds.
Sounds great. Love to.
Dude, my close encounters of the third kind moment happened in 2014, where I got, as weird as this sounds, man, I got called out at my friend's house. My friends had this 10-acre property that was haunted as anything. And I got called outside by shapes pulsating in my head to the point of a migraine.
Really?
Yeah. Went outside into their back 40, and in their neighbor's yard, this is about 10 o'clock at night, in their neighbor's yard, I literally said, "You called me outside out of God's peace, love, and light. Can you show me where you are?" And about 150 yards away in the neighbor's property, it lit up like a Christmas tree on the ground on my command.
You know, again, and I have had some similar types of experiences with orbs. I've photographed a couple of them. You know, the orbs especially like are a recurring theme, and I've got a theory behind that and evidence of that too. We can get into that too as well, but no, I think it's all related. Look, these things have been happening for tens of thousands of years. I could show you paintings from the 13th century of orbs with people inside of them. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've seen those, but
Yeah.
from Czechoslovakia. And those are connected to. There's a whole story behind this. It's all connected to the Sumerians and the Anunnaki and the Grail and Jesus actually too. Yeah, believe it or not, all
We'll
of it's
get to
connected.
absolutely everything, my man. That's
Oh, great.
90. We got 90 minutes left with you. We're going to be good. We
Nice.
got about 45 seconds coming back here.
Perfect.
Man, I'm pumped up for tonight.
Yeah, we'll pick it up on the perpendicular angle of the UFO I saw.
Perfect.
That way we'll have a continuous story.
Yeah, man. You know how this works. You're not playing games. You know how this works.
Yeah, we've had. It's a good interview. The last interview I did, the guy didn't ask I think he asked 4 questions the whole time. I was kind of like disappointed, you know.
Well, let's rock and roll this. Thank you, Jay, for the lone super chat so far, and here we go with the second half hour. All right, here goes the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We appreciate you tuning us in wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Reminder to all of you that if you missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Here we have William Warwick. We're talking about this incredible encounter he had with a UFO where he was looking off into the Orion constellation, but something kept on blocking the belt. William, I'm in love with this story, man. Let's go with it.
Yeah. So at this point in my sighting, it was basically perpendicular to me, and I had sort of a side view of it. I call it like a parade view, because that's kind of what it felt like to me. That this thing was, and this is a feeling or a recollection that I had after the event, not during it, but that it seemed to almost like, and it could have just been a totally random thing. It had nothing to do with me, but the way that it dropped down and then went in front of me like that, in retrospect, it almost seemed like it was on parade, like so that I could see it essentially. Now, I'm not saying that I summoned it or anything like that or any of that stuff, you know, and I'm not saying that that's not possible. I was thinking of my grandfather. I wasn't thinking of UFOs. And the night that my grandfather died on March 12th, when that would have been, I was about 4 years before that, 1997, 1993, I believe, 1992, excuse me, March 12th, 1992 was the evening that I had seen him in the nursing home, and we made a promise to each other, and I said, you know, if there's something on the other side, let me know, you know, when you get to the other side. He was in hospice, and he died. He actually died on March 13th, which is an interesting part of the story. But the last time I saw him alive was March 12th. And so that was kind of the reason why I stopped, because I sort of made that promise with him, and he made that promise to me that, you know, if there was anything on the quote unquote other side, that he would send me a message. Right. So, but I didn't think that would come in the form of a boomerang shaped object that would float over my head. Right. You know, that was not the vision that I had, right, of how that would come about. So, you know, there is a spiritual aspect of it that's deeply personal to me, but I can't say that that was the reason why it happened. So anyway, the craft is basically perpendicular to me at this point. The high pressure sodium lamps have a yellow halo. They're reflecting off the bottom of it, and now I can see its silhouette, and I have an idea of exactly of the outline of the shape, and I can see the bottom silhouette of it very clearly, and the leading edge of it, or what we would call the leading edge on an aircraft. But this was not an aircraft, right? And the reason why this wasn't an aircraft is because I was able to see that the planned form of this, the rectangular, the cross section of this, wasn't a wing. So in a wing, as I'm sure everybody knows, you have a little bit of a curvature at the top, and there's a low pressure airflow at the top, and Bernoulli principle and all that stuff. And of course, you have to be moving forward through the air to create lift, right? But this thing was basically like almost stationary at this point, right? it may have just been a perception of mine because of, when you get intensely focused, things tend to slow down, but it almost seemed to stop for a second. Um, and at that time, I could tell that, as I told you before, it was essentially about 35 feet wide. And keep in mind, I'm a builder. I'm a Class A contractor. I've been building houses my whole life, so I'm very good at judging distance. And I flew in planes, and I was in search and rescue, so pretty good at judging distance, right? And I had the house, of course, to judge its width and its height and everything else, and the trees and everything. You know what I mean? So I had a really good perspective at that point, and it was clearly about a 35-foot front to back, 25-foot tall. At this point in my sighting, I couldn't really tell how wide it was because that came a little bit later, when it was further to my right, and I could get a perspective view from behind. But at this point in the sighting, and this is really important, I could tell that this was not a curved wing at all. In fact, because of the way this high pressure selenium lamps were reflecting off the leading edge of it, and basically like the bottom right front part of it, I could tell, and this is important. This is one of the things that blew my mind, was that it had no seams, had no rivets. It was essentially it looked like an injection molded, seamless uh, uh, craft, right? Okay. Now, anyone that you look at any aircraft that we have right now, with the exception maybe the Tic Tac sightings and stuff like that, but any quote unquote aircraft that we have today is mostly built with aluminum and rivets and high strength, titanium and that kind of thing, and then coated with certain coatings, et cetera, et cetera. But you could see seams, you could see, transitions. This thing was seamless, no rivets, nothing.
Was it silent?
Absolutely silent, with the exception of what I perceive to be a hum, like a very, very, and it almost, you could feel it. Okay, and this is important because it's a little bit later in the sighting. That's a good question. But as far as the craft itself, no, there was really no detectable sound. But I could say I want to say that I almost could feel it, and I heard the sound of maybe like an 18-wheeler in the distance. You know what that sounds like oh, ooh, like that. I don't know if you can hear what I'm saying.
Yep.
And to be fair, there was a highway not that far away. So it could have been an 18-wheeler, right? But at any rate, no, there was no real detectable sound. So shape, not an airfoil. Okay, so that's not a plane. There's no thrust. There's no jet engine sound. It's not a blimp because it can't go from that height to that height that quickly. And then, you know what I'm saying? So I'm going through my mind really quickly. Not a blimp, not the B-2, not hang glider, not, you know what I mean? And mind you, I had a photographic memory and eidetic memory, and I memorized all the Jane's Encyclopedia as part of my training. I was a spotter. My job was to identify the aircraft. So I'm literally probably like one of the best people in the world, other than an actual pilot, to witness that, right? Western Military Civilian Air Patrol is a U.S. Air Force auxiliary unit. Actually, we're called up if the Air Force, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so at that point, I'm like, I'm a little freaked out, actually. At that point, because I'm like, okay, what is this? You know what I mean? This is not. It's not supposed to be here. There's no lights on it. And at that point, because I was literally standing on my buddy's porch, I had just gone out to get a business card and come back, right? And there's a screen door and his door right there. And actually, the March Madness was on. It was March 12th. And ODU, I forgot, that's part of the reason why I was there. ODU was in the playoffs that year, right? 1997. So, and this is the part that really freaks me out, and I have a theory behind this. So, at that point, it appeared like it had almost stopped, and it's like it's on parade for me. Like I'm just seeing this whole thing in front of me, like I'm on a parade stand watching it. And I shout out to my buddy, who's probably 10 feet from me through the door, Teddy, right? That was his name. And I was like, I didn't hear anything come out of my mouth. So then I take a little, quick deep breath, and I go, hey, and I don't want to shout too loud because my wife's sleeping, but hey, Teddy. And then again, like really nothing came out. And then I took a really deep breath, and I like really shut. I'm like, I can't swear, but I'm like, hey, Teddy. Nothing. Nothing, no sound came out of my mouth. I could feel my lungs, I could feel my chest contract, my throat vibrating, right? No sound came out. Yeah. So in retrospect, I think that at that point, the craft was so close to me that either as a byproduct of its propulsion mechanism or it had active noise canceling. That's the only thing I can think of, which is not unheard of. Like we have noise canceling headphones. It's a everyday technology, right? But so, after the third time I tried to shout out his name and no sound came out, that's when I got really freaked out. You know what I mean? I was like, internally, I was, people are always like, oh, I would go get my camera. I would do this. I would do that. I'm a pretty tough guy. I grew up in the South Boston housing projects. I've been in more fights than you can imagine. I don't want to get into everything, but essentially, like what I think what most people do, and I've seen other people. I've had UFO experiences with multiple people who are with me, and a lot of people. I'm not going to say most, but maybe 2 out of 3 will actually just freeze. It's the stare response. It's the predator response, right?
Yes.
And they will not move, and they will not say a word, and they will not, you know what I'm saying? So for me, after I had tried to shout out, Teddy's name to get his attention, come out here and look at this thing before, it disappears or whatever. I don't know what it's going to do. So the psychological impact on me after I tried to shout out his name and I couldn't get it was like, I literally just, I was just paranoid. I don't know how to describe it. It was psychological shock, right? Because you're just like, okay, what's going to happen? Now I don't want to say that I was fearful, right? It was more like astonishment, amazement. What is this? Do you know what I mean? Like, what is going on? Like, this is like what? It was just I was afraid to move. I guess is the best way to put it. You know what I mean? I was afraid to take my eyes off it. I was afraid to take my eyes off it. I guess is a good way to put it, right? Because you don't know what it's going to do. It's like an alien going to come out of this. Am I going to get shot by a alien? Like what is going on? So, and all these things are going through your head, simultaneously. And because I have a photographic memory in my head, right, I'm going through every single picture of every aircraft of everything I've ever seen in my life, and I get zip, right? So that's like a computer crash to someone with the photographic memory, because for me it was a computer crash, and I'm like, what is this? And then I'm like, oh no, it's got to be a BB. It's trying to convince myself that it's anything other than what it must be, which is UFO. So anyway, oh boy. So
You got some aliens checking you out. That's for sure.
well, oh god, there's a whole bunch of things that occurred as a result of this, which I don't know if we'll have enough time to get into all that. Maybe a follow up interview, but essentially, so now it's basically perpendicular, and now it did a I shouted out, nothing came out, and it kind of did a little bit of a course correction, like a little bit of a right dip and a yaw. And then it kind of like readjusted itself, and then it just carried on at like a 5-mile-an-hour pace, like just floating, just no effect on the trees, no effect on the lights. You've heard all these stories about the UFOs affect the trees and the lights and nothing. If I guarantee you, if someone had been standing in that street and looking straight up, they wouldn't have seen anything because the brightness of the lights would have obscured anything. And the thing was so and I have some experience with nanotechnology. I got patents, and so the best way to describe the skin of it is that it was like I would call it a metallic flame spread coating. So it's not a smooth coating like a metal, like a regular piece of metal, right? So a flame spread coating actually like sputters um, um, metals, right? And it has kind of like an undulating coating. It's not a perfectly smooth. It's smooth in the sense that there's no seams, there's no rivets, but I could tell by the way the light reflected off of it that it was like a gunmetal blue gray. It blended in with the night so good. It was incredible. Not like the stealth coatings that we see, by the way. Totally different. Totally different. And a lot of those stealth coatings have, and I know what they're made from. I don't know what they're made from, but a pretty good idea of what they're made from. Most of them are made from low density materials like aerogels and stuff like that. That's not top secret or anything like that. So, but this was completely different. This was like a metal flame spread plasma coating. This is the best way to describe it. Very unique. Very unique.
How
Never seen it.
far were you from this?
Oh, at that point in time, I calculated. I actually went back a few years later with the laser rangefinder. I calculated if it was about roughly 5 to 10 feet above the streetlights. This is like less than 100 feet from the right tip to my position. So I mean, I could have thrown a rock at it. Definitely could have thrown a rock at it. Yeah. Now here's actually, to me, this is as if this part as if all of this wasn't enough. So at this point in time, now that things kind of drifted off into the distance, and there was a row of apartment buildings in the distance, and at this point in time now, I could see like the back end of it from left to right, right? So now I've got a perspective view of it, right? So I had the initial view, which was kind of a chevron shape, and then I've got the side view, which gives me the side plan view of the wing, saying this is definitely not. I mean, look, it had the profile of a brick with rounded corners, right? Bricks don't fly. I can tell you that right now. Now, at this point in time, it's further down, maybe 400, 600 feet, something like that, maybe a football field or two away from me. And that's when I got the width perspective. This thing was like, I calculated 300 feet wide. So you got a 300-foot wide, 25-foot tall, chevron shape, flying brick that's 35 feet from front to back. And to put that in perspective, 747 is 178-foot wingspan. So this is twice the wingspan of a 747, about as thick or as tall as a 747 is in the thickest part, and continue that thickness 300 feet wide. It's massive. It was the most massive. It was. I joke. It was like not quite as big as an aircraft carrier, but it was like a destroyer in the sky.
How did
Like
this affect your psyche?
Oh man, I actually I convinced myself at that point. My training kicked in at that point. This is when I got on the CB radio. This is what screwed me. So I said, okay, this is obviously a military experimental aircraft. I'm thinking it's got to be nuclear powered, or something, right? It wasn't jet engine powered. There was no jet exhaust. There was no trees moving. There was no, you know what I mean? And it must be you have an air emergency, right? They must be having an air emergency, and we were literally maybe quarter mile from the landing strip from Norfolk Naval Base. I knew the way everything was oriented, and it was crossing the landing runway of Norfolk Naval Base, which you just never do that. That's like you will lose your pilot's license immediately, and it didn't have any collision lights on, so you lose your pilot's license immediately. So I just surmised that it must be an experimental military aircraft that was trying to do an emergency landing at Norfolk Naval Base. So me, my 26 naive self, hops in my company truck, and I hop on my CB radio and I say, hey, dispatch, blah, 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 652, whatever my number was at the time. I got I got a really strange thing to tell you, but I don't know who else to tell. And I'm afraid if this thing crashes and blows up and it's, maybe nuclear powered, we may all die. But I want you to know that I just saw, I don't even know if I called it a UFO. I might have called it a UFO. I don't recall exactly. But I just let the dispatch know that I saw, maybe I did say UFO. I can't remember. And I think it's going to crash. Or maybe I said military aircraft or a UFO. I actually don't remember what I told them. And what you're trained to do is you're trained to give the last known position in the heading, because in search and rescue, that's how everything works. You find out where the last known position of the aircraft was and what its heading was, and then you create a search, uh, you know, um, plan around that information. So I figured, hey, if this thing's going to crash and we're all going to die, it was so close to the ground. It was literally what I was thinking. You know what I mean? Like, um, so I reported it, and I just said, hey, this could be nothing. I don't really know what's going on. Maybe you get reports from somebody else. If any, they're writing other techs in the area, maybe they saw it too. I don't, it's a very innocuous kind of conversation, not, nothing crazy. It was a slow night. And, she dispatch called me back and said, no, nothing's going on. Da 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 da. Very innocuous conversation. So that was around 10 p.m., March 12th, 1997. So I made my report, and I'm just kind of like, what was that? A little blown away. So I finally go back into, meet my buddy Teddy, and I say, man, you're not going to believe what the hell I just saw. You know what I mean? Like, how do you even explain that? You leave to get a business card for 5 minutes, and you come back and you're talking about UFOs and all this stuff, right? So, and so I told him the story, and I was a little freaked out by it. I think we watched the end of the game, and I went home that night. And I'll be completely honest with you, I expected to go home that night and turn on the news and see this all over the news. How does a 300-foot wide boomerang shaped UFO float over the world's most protected military base, right? Biggest military base in the world, more nuclear power there within a mile than anywhere else on Earth, and no one reports it. There's no news about it. So, and I said,
Crazy.
okay, well, it's early, right? So I didn't get too freaked out about it. So I went to bed, didn't sleep well, obviously. Woke up the next morning. That was March 13th. Woke up March 13th, turned the news on, called in sick, actually. Oh, I had 4 sick day PTO days coming. So I could have taken 4 days off, no problem. So I called in sick that day. That was March 13th. And I spent the whole day like watching the news. I just expected this to be on the news. You just couldn't believe that it wouldn't be on the news. And then that night, I waited till 11. And it wasn't on the news again. And now I'm really getting freaked out. Okay, now I'm really like, okay, what did I just see? Right. So the next day is Friday, March 14th. I wake up, call in sick again, but I didn't call in sick because of the UFO or anything else like that. It was just a random thing. One of my close friends from high school got killed in a car accident. And my sister called me up and said, hey, so and so has passed away. The funeral's going to be this weekend. Love if you can make it. So I actually called in sick on Friday just because I told them I was going to take my second PTO day off and go to Massachusetts and go to his funeral. So that was at 9 o'clock. And so at 10 o'clock, right, my boss shows up at my doorstep. Never been to my house before, been working at the company for over a year. And and he's with the assistant manager. So I'm like, okay, this is not good, right? And of course, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I got 4 PTO days. I could take them off for anything. My buddy just died, and I went to high school with him. Why are you showing up at my house to bust my chops, right? Not thinking really anything of the UFO at all, right? And I open up the screen door, and the first words out of my manager's mouth was, "Come on, Bill, UFOs." And as soon as he said that, I was like, "You're here to fire me." But in my mind, I didn't say it out loud. And I said, and then I said, "Are you firing me?" Because I just figured, why would he say that, right? You know what I mean? Why would he bring the assistant manager? And yeah, they fired me right on the spot.
That is horrible.
No
Horrible.
warning. No warning. No, and mind you, I'm working my way through college. I mean, I'm going to school in my Roto-Rooter uniform with my beeper on. You know what I mean? And I'm a senior in college, mechanical engineering. Yeah, well, it gets even better. So
Well,
you know, we
I'm so invested in this story right now. We're going to continue it when we return for hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio. My name is David Scott. Our guest, William Warwick. Yes, we will get to the Phobos Enigma, but we got to finish this story first. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott. Dude, I am so invested in this story right now. This is
oh,
incredible.
great. Oh, thanks, man. It's been a long time since I told it. I took me a long time to come forward with it. Actually, I really didn't come forward publicly until 2007. Actually, you know, I was really still concerned about you know, the implications of what I saw, and I don't know how deeply we want to get into that, but there were some really strange things that happened. You know,
Let's
there's
just run
reasons why. Yeah.
Let's
What's that?
run with it. Hey, I'm going to take a quick break here. I'm going to put you in the green room. We got about 5.5 minutes. I'll be right back. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. Appreciate it. I'm gonna grab a bite too.
All right. Be right back. Hi, CS. How are you? All right, I am back. And let's bring William back. This is an awesome story, man. God, I can't wait to hear more. The edge of my seat. Lovely Linda Thompson, how are you? Granola Grin, good to see you. Who else has jumped in here? I think we are caught up. Thank you to Jay for our lone super chat tonight. Greatly appreciate the love and support, everybody. Thank you very much. Excuse me. All right, William, we got about 10 seconds here.
Sounds good, buddy.
Here we go. Here we go with hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. We always appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hi to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Trope. Trope is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets a password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. We continue on with William Warwick. This wasn't the reason why we brought him on, but I am enthralled with this UFO encounter that he had back in 1997. He actually got fired from his job because of it. Yeah, William, I got to ask right off the bat, how did your bosses know about you talking about a UFO or seeing this UFO?
Oh, it was my CB radio report to dispatch that I made right after I saw it. Yeah. So, which is like I said, a completely innocuous conversation. You know what I mean? It wasn't like I was hysterical. It wasn't like I was, you know what I mean? I was simply just said, hey, I saw something. I don't know what it was. It could have been a UFO. I mean, well, that was it's an unidentified flying object, right? So, here is the last known position. I'm over here at, Rogers Avenue. It was headed, north, or whatever it was. Yeah, north, at 5 miles an hour. And if anything happens, you have a record of it. That's literally pretty much what I said, and dispatch writes down whatever you say. And, if the thing crashed and blew up and I got killed, they would have some kind of record of it. Literally, that's kind of what I was thinking, that was how I was trained in the Civil Air Patrol. It's just what you did. If I had known that I would have gotten fired for it, I never would have done it. You know what I mean? That's, it was unbelievable. Oh, and then it gets better. So, and this is why I think there was something more sinister to this, right? Because we leased our vehicles, right? So we paid for our own vehicles, our own, work trucks and tools and everything, right? And I said, and the policy was that if you get fired or you lose your job or anything like that, you have the ability to buy it out, right? Because you paid for it, you paid for the lease, so you have the option to buy out the lease. That's how you make your money. It's a personal vehicle as well. It's not just your work truck, right? So I said, okay. I said, so listen, I'm going to Boston. My buddy just died, and and I'm going to get a loan and pay off the van, and I'll turn in, there was basically a big machine that was theirs. And I said, I'll turn it in on Monday. Right? No big. I mean, I've been working there for a year with no, issues or anything. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like I was a acrimonious situation for them to just come up there and like fire me and they take my vehicle from me and lock me out of my lease for the vehicle. So I normally not I don't have a vehicle, I don't have tools, and I don't have transportation anymore. A job. But that's exactly what they did. They said, no, you got to clean everything out right now. I was like, well, I just installed a $1,200 stereo system in there. It's built into the dash. I was like, I don't like it'll take me hours to get that out. And they're like, we don't care. They're like, if you don't take your stuff out of it in the next hour, we're calling the sheriff. And I was like, call the sheriff. So the sheriff comes down, son, sorry, you got to get your stuff out of there. And I was like, well, I mean, you want me to rip it out? And he's like, I don't care what you do. So I'm literally ripping the dashboard of my vehicle apart, which is supposed to be my vehicle, to give them back their crap. And my hands are bloody, and my neighbors are looking at me like, what the hell is going on? It was absolutely one of the most traumatic times of my life, without question. That's why I say, if you've ever seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that's basically what happened to me. You know what I mean?
What was the boss's issue with you seeing a UFO? I mean, sure, over dispatch, but whatever. Was he embarrassed for you or embarrassed for his company? I mean, that sounds like a load of crap.
I mean, well, it's no, because it's not a public CB radio system. It's a closed commercial, thing. If there were 3 people that heard that, it would have been me, the dispatcher, and maybe 2 other techs that were on call that night. Whoever just happened to have the CB radio on that night. So no, there was no reason to fire me at all. And the reaction was so out of proportion to anything. You know what I mean? Like, hey, Bill, you reported a UFO. We have a company policy. I mean, what is our company policy against reporting UFOs? No, of course not. It's a civil rights violation, right? And it wasn't like I was like, it wasn't like I was on the job. I was actually off the job. I wasn't even working that night. I was just meeting a friend, watching the basketball game, and I went to get a business card to do a job that I was going to do the next day. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't even like I was working when I reported it. So anyway, and I think, again, in the retrospect, I think there was more to this, right? Obviously, I think that someone came to them and said, you're going to fire this guy. That's what I think happened, actually. Because they wouldn't care. They wouldn't have cared. Who would care about that? Name one other person in UFO history that you know of, that you can name by name, that was officially fired from their job for reporting a UFO. It didn't even, name one. So, and it gets better. So check this out. So check this out. So, I was 26 years old, working through college. I'm not embarrassed to say this. I came from the South Boston House of Projects. I didn't have any money. I was on my own. I was 100% on my own. 1,000% on my own. There was nobody coming to bail me out. My parents, weren't going to send me money. I didn't have a rich uncle. So I had to file for unemployment, for a couple of weeks. So I go down on unemployment and they deny me. I said, why are you denying me? By law, they're required to give me 3 warnings, written warnings, before you fire someone. If you don't give them 3 written warnings, and they have to be legitimate reasons, right? Legitimate warnings, then I'm eligible for unemployment. And that my employer had to respond to that. So my initial filing for unemployment was denied, and then I appealed it, and I said to the inspector, I said, no, you tell me why I got fired. Tell me why I got fired. And if you can't tell me why I got fired, then you need to give me unemployment. Because if you're going to tell me that I got fired for reporting a UFO, then that's a violation of my civil rights, and I'm going to sue all of you. Unfortunately, Virginia is a right to work state, which means they can fire you for any reason at all. And so what I should have done, and if I had the money and the resources and a rich uncle, was sued the living crap out of them. for violating my civil rights to free speech because I wasn't working at the time. See, that's the key.
Right.
So, anyway, a far off target we got here, but that's about as real as it gets. So, if you want to know why I got into UFO and studying UFOs, that's why, because UFOs came to me, and I had nothing to do. You know what I mean? I mean, I worked. Actually, it made me self-employed. So in a way, it forced me to become self-employed, which is a good thing. You know, so even though the event itself and the aftermath of that took years to recover from, um, in actuality, in retrospect, it set me on a path of success in doing things and meeting people and getting a patent, and that would never have happened had that event not happened. So
Have
for
you
me,
ever since?
what's that?
Have you ever talked to your former boss since?
No. If I saw him, I'd punch him in the face. Honestly,
No, that
I
would.
would punch him in the face. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he knows he would deserve it. So,
Wow.
but whatever. I mean, at this point in time, whatever. I mean, he's a fool. He's a fool's fool. You know, the fool's fool. It doesn't matter at this point because there's so much that's come out since then, right? You know. Oh well, here's the cool thing. So that's how I got into the Phoenix Lights. So my event was on March 12th, 1997, 24 hours before the Phoenix Lights. So when I found out about the Phoenix Lights, it happened on March 13th, which is essentially the next night. That gave me something to key into. I had a similar event. Now we have a pattern. Now we have something that we can correlate, right? Just like any other investigation, like a homicide detective. Like, what's the evidence? Gather the evidence, compare it. You got two similar events. You got two descriptions of chevron boomerang-shaped objects, one in Phoenix, Arizona, and my personal one. So for me, it was easy to investigate this because I knew it was real, right? So if I saw, and I did this, believe me, I've got thousands and thousands of pages of documents, going back to 1997, 30 years of work of boomerang-shaped object sightings, right? I haven't been into it as much lately, but I gathered enough evidence to basically put together a picture of what's probably going on, right? And here's the crazy thing: this isn't the chevron boomerang shapes, or go back thousands of years. Thousands of years. The Aborigines painted in their caves boomerang-shaped UFO objects and beings that look like aliens.
True.
So these things are not new. These have been seen by our ancestors for thousands of years, and that was one of the things that I learned as I got deeper and deeper and deeper into this. So it's multifaceted. It's probably multidimensional, right? In terms of time and space, right? Because people forget, if you have a way to nullify gravity, then pretty much by definition you're changing space-time, because gravity warps space-time. So if you can manipulate, change, or neutralize the gravitational effects of something, you create a bubble or a wave, or from my own opinion, there's multiple ways of doing it. Then you are essentially creating a time machine by definition.
What is your patent in?
One of them was military, and I can't talk about it, and the other one is a civilian vacuum insulated panel system, which uses aerogels. Well, many things, but it could use aerogels. Well, and here's the funny thing about that. So when I saw the aircraft, that spurred me on to try and figure out what was it made from, what could it be made from. And that's when I got into aerogels and aerogel nanotechnology development to understand what kind of materials could be used to replicate the aircraft. Because for me, it was like I knew that it existed. I knew that there's some way to nullify the effect of gravity. I knew that there was some way that they had to have an engine that powered it, so a power source, right? and then the skin and the shape of the craft and everything, right? And the three domes. Oh, by the way, there appear to be three sort of like little domes on the bottom of it, like one in each corner and then one in the middle, right? I kind of see the outline of them very clearly. But there was no lights come out or anything like that, so I don't know if that was part of the propulsion system, right? Or who knows? But so sorry, I kind of got a little off on the track there. What was the question again?
I just asked about your patents and everything that kind of went along with it.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So this kind of like ties in a little bit to the Tic Tacs. So there's another gentleman, Professor Simon, I believe his name is, and Josh Bertrand, who I've been following, and they're talking about aerogels and vacuum systems, and of course I have a patent in vacuum systems, not for aircraft, but many years ago, I believe it was on Coast to Coast, I had put forward the theory that I had that the craft that I saw, whether it was alien or human made, was most likely an aerogel skin, which had been coated with probably carbon aerogels or graphene. Graphene and carbon would be a good combination. And the skin of the craft was actually the battery, the capacitor, and the power source. And the way that this would work was that devices like HARP or ionospheric heaters, radio frequency generators, would beam energy up into the ionosphere, and it would bounce off the ionosphere, and it would be absorbed by the skin of the craft and stored as electricity in the super. So the skin of the craft is actually a supercapacitor. See, so it doesn't need a power source. So you don't need fuel, and you don't need an engine. And that was one of the things that the early investigators of the UFOs couldn't figure out was how there's no, where's the fuel, where's the engine? You just got, how does this thing work? But if the skin of the craft itself is both the structural component and the engine and the electrical storage, then you could transmit the energy either from a ground-based station or a space-based station, you see? A mothership, so to speak, right? So the energy, you don't have to carry the energy with you. So that was the first breakthrough. And if you don't have to do that, then that saves a lot of weight. And if you're using graphene enhanced aerogels, then you have the lightest weight to begin with, the lowest density products in the world. And if you're putting graphene in it, then it's 1,000 times stronger. So that explains how you get a 300-foot wide craft without it bending and catastrophically failing in the middle. See? Bending and stuff like that. So I was able to figure out how they did it. And then the Tic Tacs come along, and Josh Bertrand and Professor Simon start talking about vacuum insulated. Their theory that the Tic Tacs are basically that, what I had described, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. So obviously that technology has come a little bit further now, I would suspect. And they're testing that. And they're testing it on our guys because they want to see what our reaction is going to be. They want to see if we can detect it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's why they did the demonstration in front of the commander of the Navy to test, what the reaction would be and see how we, would respond, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's called a red cell. So in the military, you basically have a red cell comes out and randomly test you to see how you're going to react and gather data and stuff like that. That's my personal opinion. I don't have any inside knowledge. That's just my personal take on it. Based on
what do you think a lot of these craft that we are seeing are? Do you think they are ours? Do you think that they are from somewhere else?
It's funny, I friends that know me will pull me aside and ask me the same question. And the answer is D, all of the above. It's ours, it's theirs, it's the aliens, it's the interdimensionals, it's China, it's Russia, it's a number of countries that have the capabilities to create what we would describe as an anti-gravity craft. Now here's the interesting thing: if my theory is correct, then if my hypothesis, is correct, then the craft that I saw possibly, and the Tic Tac possibly could be vacuum-based aircraft, which are not technically anti-gravity. We're not reinventing the laws of physics with the vacuum aerogel graphene-based craft that uses a vacuum to create the lift and the propulsion, so to speak. See, so and keep in mind, aerogels were quote unquote invented in 1932, right? So they had 50 years, 70, 80, 120 years almost, 100 years to figure this out, right? So when was Roswell? 1947.
47.
So yeah. So and now the side benefit of aerogels because of the low density is they have extremely low radar reflectivity, right? So probably part of the reason why aerogels were restricted for so long, they were only used in pretty much military applications until 1998, actually. Interestingly enough, right? When the first SBR came out and I started working with that. Um, so yeah. So I think without question we have technology. And again, I'm not saying I have inside knowledge of anything. I'm not claiming to be, you know, any of that stuff. I'm just simply applying what I have learned, firsthand experience, etc., to what I observe. And it would seem to me, well, I'll take the Fermi paradox, for example, right?
Sure.
So the Fermi paradox what it basically says is that the reason why we don't see, well, there's a couple of things you can infer from it. The reason why we don't see aliens is because, we're the only ones, right? That's one theory. But another theory that I came up with was that in actuality, all of the aliens are here, right? Because space is so vast that in our observable universe, all of the civilizations that were advanced enough that were billions of years older than us uh, had to find the one planet that was habitable enough for them, right? Which is Earth. So if we go with that premise, then it makes sense that a lot of the UFOs, the different types of UFOs and the counters and the different types of descriptions that we have, it's so much, right? And let's just say 99% of it is just pure made up stuff or people misidentifying things, hallucinations. Let's say 99% of it. That 1% still represents a huge um, um, possibility that there are multiple civilizations or species that live on Earth, really under it, and in the oceans, because 2/3 of the world is covered by oceans, and 98% of it is really not been explored commercially. Military, of course, has submarines that know a lot more about what's going on. But essentially, if there's 7 billion people on the land, how many people do you think could fit on something that's 2/3 as big as that? You could literally have multiple civilizations that live under the ocean, right? Now, why would they live under the ocean? Well, for one, it's protection, not just from us, but from a catastrophic extinction level event. Because let's say a comet or something comes into the atmosphere, an alien species or something like that, it's actually much more difficult for an object to strike the Earth and hit the ocean, and the ocean is basically a big shock absorber, right? Unless it's something like massive, really, really massive. But you get what I'm saying? So
Yes.
if these civilizations had survived through that and they were able to manipulate mass or manipulate gravity, then pressure, or hence gravity, at under the ocean would have no effect. It would be negligible. Right?
Hold that thought. We're going to break. An hour more with William Warwick right after this.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
All right, my man, we are clear.
Right on.
Love having you on as a guest, my man. Thank you very
We may have to do another interview actually about the book.
much. Well, I was going to get into it next, but I mean, we're on such a roll that's just what I do on this show, man. I just let it happen. You know,
No, I love it. That's the
Let it
best. I agree. I love it because at the end of the day, what people want is a conversation, right? They don't want to fucking, you know.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I swear? I apologize. We're off right now,
That's
right?
We're off the radio side, so that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sorry, I let my guard down there for a minute. But yeah, you know what I mean. Like I try to put on a good show. I wanna make it engaging. You know what I mean? Not just a bunch of facts and information that's not emotional or. So I love the fact that you ask probing questions like that, and I don't know what they are. And I really like that. I appreciate that.
Well, you know what? I didn't spend a lot of time in journalism to be, silly like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. You go with it. You go where the story goes, because just like I told you before, like uh, there's so many facets to this. We're talking about the Fermi paradox now. If you want to get into um, I was going to segue that into the nuclear incursions. Like why, why would they be so concerned about us? If they're billions of miles away, light years away, why would they come all the way here just to inspect our nuclear facilities? That doesn't make any sense, right?
No.
But what
Nothing.
makes sense is if they also share the planet with us, and every time we set off an underground nuke, it causes serious damage to them, right? Then that would explain why they're like getting in our stuff, right? Why they have such an interest. See? So the Fermi paradox and the nuclear incursions, what's the word I'm looking for? Converge. Now that makes more sense. That the reason why this UFO activity is occurring on the nuclear bases is because they have an interest in. They don't give a shit about us. They don't want to die. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. I get you.
So yeah, and I think that's kind of you know, they're not trying to save us; they're trying to save themselves. I think, you know, and that would also explain the cattle mutilations and disappearances and all kinds of unusual things that are still happening that we really don't fully understand the phenomena yet. Right? It's a multifaceted phenomena.
Oh, for sure it is. For sure
Yeah,
it is.
and that's what makes it hard to define because there's just so many aspects to it that are undefinable. In perspective to other things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. We got about 2.5 minutes here.
Great. I'm gonna grab a Coke real quick. No, I'd love to. Let's definitely schedule another show and we can make a regular thing out of this and figure out what you want to go deeper into.
Yeah, man. I'm really enjoying tonight, so thank you very much.
No, you too. I appreciate it. It's a mutual thing. It's the interview is only as good as the interviewer, in my opinion.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I've always said it ain't about the answers, it's about the questions. You don't ask the right question, you ain't gonna get the right answer.
Oh, very true. That is very true. Let's see.
You want to lead off on a nuclear question? Why I think the nuclear bases are being probed?
Yeah, let's go with her. Let's just run with
Yeah,
it.
I like that. That'll tie in with the Fermi paradox
Let's do it.
answer. Cool.
we got about 30 seconds here.
Sounds good.
All right, we're coming back here in 3 seconds. Well, no, it's about 7 seconds. What the hell am I talking about? Jesus. Horrible host. Here we go. Here we go with the second half of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you for joining us. We always appreciate you tuning us in wherever you are on this great planet here. All right, let's get right to it. Remind all of you that if you miss portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Here we go. Final half hour. William Warwick is here. We're supposed to talk about his book, The Phobos Enigma and UFOs, but we're on to something different here. We're going to have to bring him back to discuss this. That is for sure. All right. What do you think the UFOs want with all these nuclear sites?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one of the enduring mysteries, one of the enduring mysteries of the UFO enigma is that there have been multiple, incursions onto military bases and, reports of, UFOs hovering over, ICBM silos and actually changing, the software and the hardware of the missile silos so that they, either can launch or can't launch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, in the 1960s, I don't think anyone envisioned nanotechnology, right, or nanobots or something like that. And I think it was Mr. Sala reported, at the minute Air Force Base, missile silos. And I'm not sure if it was his particular incident, but similar incidents to that, where there did not appear to be any contact between the UFO that was hovering above the restricted site. However, somehow the hardware, right, things that were hardwired, so to speak, right, like were changed, right, and put into a launch condition, right, which means they could have launched it and then shut it down, which is specifically made in such a way, like wired in such a way that it can't really happen without, turning the keys, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole sequence, right? So the idea that like this UFOs or UFOs plural are able to do these things was always quite a mystery. But now today, as a nanotechnology specialist, I go, okay, well, if we fast forward 20 years from now, and I don't even really need to say we go 20 years from now, I think in some labs they might already have this technology, but we could certainly, insert a nanotechnology devices, right, that could have infiltrated the ICBM and actually made those hardwire connections, like physically, right, like transformers, right, if you remember how it works. So that would be an explanation of how that could have happened. It wasn't magic; it was science, right? It's just science that we didn't know about, right, at the time. So then the next question is, why would they do that? Why would anyone? Why, if let's say it's an alien civilization from Pleiades, why would they care or take the time to come to Earth? Would it be an altruistic thing, right? Okay, maybe. But I think a more plausible explanation would be that we actually share the planet with other sentient species and they just don't want us to destroy it because they live here too, right? That's the simplest explanation.
I want to ask you
rather than, yeah.
I had a guest on a couple nights ago, Christopher Knight, who talks about the fact that we were talking about, how were humans created? How did they get here? And one of his theories was that we've always been here, but we keep in rotation because we were actually seeded by time travelers.
Yeah, the time travel theory has been thrown around quite a bit. In fact, I wrote a paper for Bigelow Aerospace a while back, an essay, consciousness essay, and exploring exploring some of the aspects of the impacts of alien technology and stuff like that. I apologize. I think I got off track there a little bit. What was the core of your question again?
Well, just in regards to that, time travelers are actually
right.
the ones who seeded the planet.
Right. Sure. So again, by definition, if you can manipulate gravity, you're manipulating space-time. So, like one of the theories that we're working on right now, for instance, is like the Great Pyramid, right? In Egypt, is most likely a supercapacitor, basically, which is tuned to the Earth in such a way that it was basically like a machine, right? And the Ark of the Covenant actually is the right size to fit inside the king's chamber, right? Inside the quote unquote sarcophagus. There was never a body, they never buried anybody in there. All right. The Great Pyramid was a machine and it was used for communication. It was used for microwave communication. And those air shafts are not air shafts, right? They're microwave communication channels. And what would happen is they would create an electromagnetic energy source through quantum entanglement. And that's what the tablets were. See, the tablets in the Ark of the Covenant were a quantum entangled piece from the home planet that they were trying to communicate with, you see? So the way that you travel through space-time is you have to have a piece of a quantum entangled part of the planet you're trying to go to. And then what you do is you have another piece of the planet, and it could be a small material, a metamaterial, they call it. And that metamaterial will always vibrate at the same frequency as the metamaterial that it was created from, and you separate them with the spaceship, and then you travel, and then you put that in one spot and the other spot, and then you vibrate them together, and that's how you create a wormhole in a Stargate. But you have to have a piece of the metamaterial in order to home in on it. So the Great Pyramid used the energy and the vibration that was created inside of it, most likely through a chemical reaction. Chris Dunn has documented that pretty well. And that chemical reaction created an electrical energy, which was concentrated into the king's chamber. And then that electrical energy and vibration was put out through one of the four shafts to one of the four stars that they pointed to. And so when that was active, that allowed those space travelers to travel from that particular star system to Earth. And when our ancestors rebelled against them and took the Ark of the Covenant and stole it, the machine stopped working and they couldn't come here anymore. And so the ones that were here were stuck here and they couldn't go home. And that's who the Nephilim are, the fallen ones, etc. And the wars between the gods and everything else, All of these stories, these legends, the Sumerians, they're all basically true, Ark of the Covenant, all of that. It's all basically true. We have the watered down versions of the story, right? But there's truth behind all of it. We were created to be slaves for another species. There's no doubt about it. Multiple times. Yeah. What's that?
So that's kind of scary to think of.
Yeah, it is. And yet, what's the story of the Exodus? At its core, it's a story about a rebellion of the Jews, the slaves, against the Pharaoh. But what if the Pharaoh was alien? Right? Alien species. And the Jews were just the 12 tribes of Israel, which were the 12 tribes of the human race. Metaphors. These are all metaphors. You know what I mean?
Do you think, though, that we are being visited by beings from another planet?
I think we were. I think that, again, if the Ark of the Covenant hypothesis is true, and if you look up the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant, they fit perfectly into the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber. And the tablets of destiny, or the tablets that were in there, are metamaterials. I think that all of that stuff is basically true. It's our history. It's been dumbed down for us. And I do think that I think what happened is there was a war. If you read the history, there was a war. And maybe there was another species, the Pleiadians, many people believe, lots of evidence for that, came down and they had a war with the other species, another species. Basically a war to free us. Maybe. Or maybe the Pleiadians are the ones that decided this. It's hard to know. Because all we have is the Sumerian cuneiform tablets and religion and mythology to inform us, So it's hard to tell. It's just the story they told us because that's what they want us to believe, right? Again, kind of like the UFO Navy today. Are we really seeing UFOs from other planets, or is this just our military testing equipment and stuff that's high tech? And they have a reason to want to deceive us to hide the technology because it's disruptive.
How much do you
And
think?
here's the thing too. Yeah,
Go
go ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
Finish up.
Well, and a lot of people talk about the energy and the technology. I'm in the energy sector, and when I was younger, I would think, okay, well, we should have this technology, we should release it, we should do this, we should do that. But really, if you look at macroeconomics, right? Like, okay, let's say we come out with a device that it's free energy. Okay. Well, we've got $80 trillion invested in gas and oil and other types of energy. So what happens to those $80 trillion worth of businesses and all the people that work for them and the countries that depend on them? Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq. Look at how unstable things are now. Now let's throw in free energy. What do you think that's going to do to the system?
It's going to collapse it.
Overnight. And so while we want idealistically to say we want free energy, we want clean energy, we want this and we want that, it's really difficult to go from where we are now to that society in one shot, in one generation.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta dole it out slowly so you don't collapse the system.
Do you think then other countries that have nuclear weaponry are having their nuclear facilities bombarded by UFOs too? Because you never hear anything out of Iran, China, Russia. There was a little bit, but nothing as equivalent to what we see in the United States.
Absolutely. Well, remember, the reason why you don't hear a lot coming out of those countries is because they're not open societies. They don't. Yeah. So, but the stories leak out. They've had similar encounters. I mean, I want to say every nuclear power has had these encounters. So, which leads me to believe that it's systematic, right? And it just screams to me that there's a presence here on Earth already, that we just haven't quite fully acknowledged yet. And the Native Americans have said this for quite some time. I was one of two people who was chosen to be basically a Hopi, I don't know what I would call myself, a guardian of their knowledge. And, they've got 8 or 9 species that they list as being that we share the planet with. Mud people, the ant people, the blues, the oranges, the grays, or what we call the grays, tall whites. So and the history that they have with it is that these are not alien species. Most of them are not. I think only 2. Grandfather Malava said were actually like extraterrestrial. The rest are actually So what happened is there's 5 great extinctions roughly on the Earth. Okay, so each time there was a great extinction on the Earth, whoever was the most sentient advanced species at that time went underground. See, so there's at least five of those species that live underground because of they were the most advanced species at the time when that extinction level event occurred, and their evolution continued underground. See, or underwater.
So what secrets do you think the United States government has?
Jeez. I'm going to quote Ben Rich from Lockheed, who said that whatever you can think of, we've already either done it, and or done it and figured out it wasn't worth the effort and abandoned it. So I would say whatever you can imagine, they've already done it.
The idea that I have heard recently, speaking to Ben Rich, who said we were like 50 years ahead of what the public sees right now. I have
Easily.
heard that number could be anywhere from 80 to 150 years now.
It increases exponentially. So if Ben Rich said that in the 1990s, then they were using what we would consider today probably 2010 technology, minimum. Or let's put it another way. What they were using in the late 70s and early 80s is what we would probably consider 2000 technology maybe today. Right. So that would be, rudimentary quantum AI. That would be basically the extensions of what we see today, in a sense. Photonic 3D glasses, holograms, you know what I mean? Telepathic communication, the whole 9 yards. That would have all come from them, essentially.
Do you believe in disclosure?
Oh, sure. It's been going on for thousands of years. It's still going on. That's the crazy thing. Religion was a part of disclosure, because really, if you think about religion was just an explanation for the things we can't explain, right? So, for me, the experience that I had when I look at it from a religious perspective is not unique. The 3 children of Fatima saw a UFO. So, the more you investigate it, the more you realize none of this is new, right? It's not unique as you think. It's just unique to us because we don't know our history. There's an old saying: "There's nothing new under the sun except the history you do not know." So if you don't know that, realize that this has happened before, or the stories that happened before, then how can you tell what's going on now? You don't get that perspective. So that's why, if you really want to understand what's going on, you have to look at the past. You have to read the Sumerian tablets. You have to do comparative religious studies, technology. You know what I mean? It's a multifaceted thing. Consciousness, psychology.
Oh, I get that it's a multifaceted thing, but I'm also a firm believer, and I'm curious your thoughts, that the way they are describing disclosure, right now is definitely not fruitful to us moving the subject forward.
No, because they're spending trillions of dollars a year on black budget projects. Nobody knows where the money's going. We can't see it, right? So it's either underground or it's in space, because it's really hard to hide $1 trillion. You know what I mean? So they're continuing these projects. These projects never stop going. They began in the 1940s, 1947, really, if you think about it, for obvious reasons. And I think that the UFO thing has been used as a tool to deceive the public so that they could get secret funding to build these devices. It all comes, goes back to the Nazis, and paperclip and all of that. Wernher von Braun said, allegedly, that the next war that we fight, they said first it'll be, the Russians. then it'll be terrorists, and then it'll be a fake alien invasion. Because each one of those things is really just a continuation of a previous doctrine, which is to convince the public to give them all the money in the world so they can build these devices and be masters of the universe. That's one theory. And that seems to be what's going on. Donald Rumsfeld said that the $2.3 trillion is missing from the budget. The next day, 4 planes allegedly crashed into places where the accounting offices were. It's suspicious, right? So I think part of disclosure, this whole thing about disclosure is really, I don't think people realize how much is really encompassed in it. It's everything. It's the economy, it's energy, it's consciousness. So I think inevitably, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think inevitably it's a slow process, right? I think they're trying to slow it down so it doesn't have such a shock on society. It's not that we can't accept UFOs and stuff like that. It's that but what I'm saying?
3 minutes to go. Do you think we're going to be able to put 1 million people on Mars by 20 years from now?
No, I don't think so. Mars doesn't have a magnetic field. So, how are you going to protect the people from the cosmic rays, stuff like that? There's a reason why there's basically no life there. And if there is, it's on the ground, right? So, no, I think that's a pipe dream. I think we need to fix our own planet first and get our own planet figured out before we start trying to screw other planets up. Honestly. They don't want to go to Mars. They want the asteroids. They want the asteroids for the minerals. That's this whole Mars colony thing is a joke. They're going to build robots.
The
They're
golden
going to build
diamond.
robots. Yeah, exactly. And that's why Tesla's building robots and rockets, because you need autonomous robots that can work autonomously to mine all that stuff in zero G and won't rebel and won't go, won't call in sick, won't report a UFO unless you want them to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you there. Definitely not going to lose their job over a UFO sighting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and how do you sell that? You sell, well, we're going to go to Mars and put 1 million people on there, right? Get people to invest in it, and then you send all robots because that 1 million people, you can't get 1 million people to Mars. So, I mean, that's my personal opinion. But what do I know?
If I'm still alive when that happens, I want to put the first Taco Bell up there.
On Phobos. Next to the monolith.
We could do that. Make it happen.
Next to the monolith. Absolutely. Can you imagine how much money you would make? Get interstellar travelers from all over the universe. Be like an interstellar kegger.
I would totally do that. Not going to lie. Do me a favor. As we got about 45 seconds left with you tonight, William. And I want to say a big thank you for coming on. This has been so much fun tonight with you.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it.
Tell our audience where they can find your book, more information on you.
So shortly we should have it published on Amazon and Kindle. If you'd like to get more information, be happy to send you a pre-published PDF copy. You can send me an email at my name, William Warwick, at pm.me.
That's William Warwick at pm.me, as in the word me. Love it. My friend, thank you for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Let's stay in touch and let's do this again. We got to get Phobos here on the air, so we'll line that up, dirty filth. But thank you very much. Coming up next, Swamp Dweller, Little Timmy James, Day 101 in the Weird News. It's a busy hour 3 next.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
He was good. He was real good. Be right back, everybody. Ugh. All right. I am back. There's little Timmy James. What's happening, little Timmy James?
Not too much. How about you?
What's with that weird wave you just did?
The circular wave.
All right.
Good show tonight.
It was a good show. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Filthy hit a good one there, as he normally does.
Yep.
He takes the booking job very seriously, and he does a great job.
Yeah, he does. Way to go, Filth.
Hooray to Filth. We got 25 seconds. Thank you to Major Lee, Linda, and Jay for the super chats. Greatly appreciate the love. And Swamp Dweller will be about 2 minutes 52 seconds.
Don't.
Here we go with the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We love it that you are tuning us in with lots of tinfoil surrounding you, maybe a Faraday cage to keep you safe. Hey, I want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Trope. Trope is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets a password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. It's that time. Let's head to the swamp.
Hello and welcome to Spaced Out Radio's Swamp. I'm Swamp Dweller, and tonight I'm going to take you on a mystic journey of the unknown, sharing tales of monsters, legends, and nightmares. Welcome to the Spaced Out Radio Swamp. Let me start off by saying that Alabama is a weird and wonderful place. Sure, we have a sort of redneck vibe going on, but the state is actually a very beautiful and nice place to live in. The state is no stranger to paranormal events, especially in the UFO and alien category. An example of this is the Falkville Metal Man. Interesting story there. Anyways, this experience came from my sophomore year of high school. At the time, movies like Guardians of the Galaxy and Interstellar sort of put my interest into space. I would periodically lay out in my backyard, listening to music, and gaze up at the stars. Just sitting there imagining what goes on up there, just relaxing. Occasionally, I would see a moving star, but would always attribute those to planes. Except this one star was far off from a plane, and I, for some reason, just kept my eyesight on it. It was going west, when suddenly, it instantly changed directions at a 90-degree angle, then started going south. I was confused, so I kept staring at it. A few seconds later, it changed directions instantly again, and this time it was going west. Only after it changed course, it revealed itself to not be a star. Something appeared behind the star. It was oval-shaped, glowing orange, and was massive. It made no noise, and started glowing extremely bright. I sat there in disbelief and kept my gaze on it. It looked like, upon further examination, that the star was in front of some sort of aircraft. It silently moved across the sky over my house and then suddenly just disappeared. The star was still there, and it was still moving. I was sitting there intrigued, hoping the craft would glow again, but the star soon faded into the night sky and disappeared itself. I ran inside and asked my family if they saw anything, assuming they would be considering the thing in the sky was glowing extremely bright. However, none of them saw anything. I wrote this down in my journal, which I had used to recall all sorts of weird paranormal events that I either research or experience. What makes the story weirder is that an hour later, military aircraft were out all over the sky. I don't know if that's normal, and we do sometimes see airplanes fly over our house, but never this many. There were dozens of airplanes, all seemingly scanning the sky. I've never told anybody what happened. My friends wouldn't believe me considering I come from a conservative environment, where people would scoff at the idea of anything outside of Earth. I still don't know what I saw that night, but I'm pretty sure it was a UFO.
Thank you, Swamp Dweller, for another spooky story. If you want more just like that, head on over to his YouTube channel, Swamp Dweller. Yeah, hit subscribe, ring that bell. You got thousands of stories right there for you. Time for the UFO Report.
That is an interplanetary flying space saucer. You have made me very angry. Very angry indeed.
Little Timmy James is here hanging on out with us for the UFO Report, the abbreviated version this week. And thank you, Tim, for being here once again. The power is on, I see.
Yes, it went out twice last night, which was exceptionally awesome, waking up with the clocks going like this. So, yeah, I apologize for last night there. In the last 10 minutes, it kind of, everything went for a bit of a poop, and was not good. So, everything's fine this evening. Everything, mission control's all set to go. We're all good.
That's what happens when you're not in studio.
I know. No more naps.
Nope. No more. More.
No more naps. So, 75 years ago today it's an anniversary well, not today, but I guess this week is the Farmington UFO incident, and I don't know if anybody knows too much about that. Came before Roswell, so I thought it'd be interesting to start off the evening with. So, long before the current wave of headlines about UFO incidents, American newspapers considered the mystery of UFOs to be a serious subject. One of the most spectacular cases of all time occurred over a 3-day period in 1950, March. Thousands of witnesses saw hundreds of unknown objects in the sky. For most, just hearing someone say Roswell, New Mexico conjures up the crash of something outside of town in July of 1947. The Roswell incident is now widely considered the granddaddy of all UFO cases. But 3 years later, in another part of the same state, there was a much bigger event. An armada of unknown aircraft put on a spectacular display that lasted nearly 3 days. So, new video from the USS Omaha shows unknown aerial sphere vanishing into the ocean. It happened in the rural town of Farmington, New Mexico. And sorry about that. According to first-hand witness reports, newspaper headlines and stories, and government documents, the town was buzzed by various UFOs over 3 days. The reports describe people seeing classic flying saucers, some of which flew in distinct formations while others performed impossible maneuvers. Sorry about that. These were front page news stories at the time. And when we talk about the sightings, to your point, we have to underscore the fact that this was 2.5 to 3 days of broad daylight sightings of anywhere from singles to dozens, and quite literally hundreds of reports. Documents show long history of UFO sightings over sensitive government sites. David Marler is one of the most meticulous UFO researchers anywhere. During an interview with the Mystery Wire, Marler explained what he called a quick rundown of the events of March of 1950. In Tucumcari, New Mexico, which is the opposite end of the state on the far east end, we have a flyover of a solitary object that was documented in the Tucumcari Daily Times. It was described as a saucer, and they could tell it was a saucer because of the way it tipped and moved. They could appreciate it from different vantage points, which is interesting because the echoes others reports that we heard from Farmington. That was at 9:15 on Friday, March 17th. And then on 10:15 a.m. in Farmington, 5 to 9 saucers observed directly over Main Street departed to the northeast and were reported 45 minutes later to the west of town by other witnesses. 10:30, hundreds, that's a quote from the newspaper, of objects seen west of town from Farmington, the Daily Times. 10:30, a red object was observed in 2 revolving discs seen having a tussle in the sky. Then we have at 10:30 another portion of the sky, revolving discs swooping and swerving and turning like a top were reported by witnesses. And then at 10:35, 3 objects stage a day dogfight in the sky. Again, a direct quote from the newspaper where these things seem to be interacting with one another. At 11 o'clock, we had sightings of a solitary saucer-shaped object that circled town, came from the southwest and departed to the northeast with a sudden burst of speed. 11 o'clock, 2 metallic UFO seen, smaller UFO moving very fast, south to north, and a large one was seen stationary. So these weren't objects blowing in the wind. One was stationary while the other one was moving. So between 11:15 and 11:30, swarm of hundreds of objects were observed. Red object is seen again and reported by witnesses. These departed to the northeast and with a sudden burst of speed as well. 2 o'clock now. We're into the afternoon. A silvery object shaped like rectangles with rounded edges were seen moving in a westerly direction. And at 3 o'clock, fleet from hundreds again. Direct quote from the newspaper, flying information from the northeast heading to the southwest. At that same time, it was I was able to find my research based on Albuquerque newspapers. There was a sighting also corroborated in Project Grudge files. 3 tech sergeants, an Air Force captain, standing on the tarmac at Kirtland Air Force Base at 3 o'clock saw 3 objects moving off to the northeast of Sandia Mountains. It was significant enough that they officially reported it to Project Grudge. And then later in the afternoon, there's no time actually listed in the newspaper, over Las Vegas, New Mexico, and flyover of multiple unidentified flying objects were seen. And then in Tuscanari, again on the east end of the state, we have a flyover of multiple objects with red leader being observed as well. And that's one of the consistent themes in this red object that was different from the others. The other ones were described as silver or gray, moving in a formation, not a V. All the witnesses were extremely adamant because many were former World War II military veterans that said they were moving in a formation, but not in an echelon formation like we would do with jet aircraft. So, yeah, interesting story. 75 years ago, then I went back and I had a look, and there is a ton of newspaper clippings from all over the United States and Canada, all over the world on this story. And it was just, yeah, pretty interesting. First time I'd actually run across it, but I was like 75 years old. This has got to be good. So,
I'd never heard that one before.
yeah. No, I was surprised. Well, I would be surprised if you hadn't. So I'm glad that I got you with something that you hadn't heard before.
Well, you got me there. There.
Cool. Excellent. Excellent. So I do have another story, and this is a personal encounter from a young man, and this comes from 1967. So while at home looking after his 2 younger sisters one evening in the summer of 1967, teenager Ivan Gideon found himself in the middle of events that were not only disturbing out of the ordinary, but would leave him with lingering consequences of the close encounter. So on a summer evening, August of 1967, in Oka, a town just under 40 miles outside of Montreal in Quebec, Canada, Maurice Gideon and his wife were heading out to dinner, leaving their 13-year-old son, Ivan, to look after his 2 younger sisters, Diane and Denise. Despite his young age, he was a responsible boy and very much could be trusted to be left at home alone. Despite his 2 younger siblings looking to avoid their bedtime, the evening was largely uneventful for Ivan, who spent most of his time doing homework. Then, at a little after 11 p.m., that all changed. Out of nowhere, a sudden loud noise from outside forced Ivan to stop what he was doing and make his way to the bedroom window. He later described the noise as being similar to a whirring sound, similar to the transformer or a generator. To begin with, he suspected his sisters were awake after all. However, after finding them asleep, he then began to wonder if the noise was coming from the television downstairs, which his sisters had likely left on when he had forced them to come to bed around a half hour earlier. He made his way downstairs and began to feel a sense of uneasiness as he discovered the television set was not on. Then the sound of their pet dog's barks came from the backyard outside, and these barks were not normal. Excited barks he was used to hearing, but these barks were much more frantic and agitated, as if it had suddenly become very much alerted to something. He listened for several moments to the dog's anxious barks before his attention was drawn to the bright light seemingly coming from the bathroom window. Slowly, he made his way back upstairs. As he made his way towards the bathroom, Ivan now began to contemplate if something or someone was trying to get inside the house. With this in mind, he was more than relieved to find the bathroom empty when he arrived there. That relief, however, was only very temporary, as he noticed a bright, glowing light pushing through the window from outside. Again, cautiously, he made his way towards the window in order to look outside. To his utter shock, hovering just above the trees, approximately 20 feet above the ground and a short distance from the house, was a brightly colored disc-shaped object. As he watched the bizarre events unfold, he heard what he later recalls as the sound of branches breaking, as if the object was causing damage to the trees only several feet below it. The object then heads closer to the house, albeit slowly, but heading towards him nonetheless. At the same time, he feels a sudden weakness overcoming him, as well as feeling a general feeling of sickness. He backed away slightly from the window, still keeping the object in sight, but certain that the sudden unwell feeling he was experiencing was a consequence of the strange craft's presence. At this point, his sisters had both woken up and called out to him. Ivan called back, telling both to hide in their bedroom and stay there. Each did exactly as he said. With the object still approaching, Ivan began to feel increasingly concerned for his well-being and that of his sisters. As he continued to watch, he witnessed a bizarre straight laser beam of light emerge from the object and project straight down towards the ground. The light moved with purpose.
Right there.
Frickin'
Laser.
Gotta love them. So this light moved with purpose, as if it were looking for something. Then, without warning, it shined directly into his face, blinding him and causing an instant intense headache. He fell to the floor of the bathroom and covered his eyes in pain. After several moments, his sight returned, but he remained disoriented. In fact, it took him a minute or two to fully come to his senses following the light striking him in the face. When he did, now even more cautiously than before, he made his way back to the bathroom and looked outside once again. The object was now hovering directly outside the house. Now, though, it was enveloped in a strange umbrella or a bell jar-shaped curtain of light. It's not clear if the light curtain was some kind of protective field around the object or something similar to weather phenomenon, St. Elmo's fire perhaps, due to an increase in electromagnetic energy or charged ions in the immediate atmosphere. Whatever it was, it remained encased in the object for several moments. Then, as Ivan continued to watch from the bathroom window, this light curtain disappeared and the object began spinning faster as it prepared for something. At the same time, the whirring sound increased, sounding similar to multiple jet engines, growing so loud that Ivan was forced to cover his ears. He watched as the object continued to spin before shooting off into the distance, disappearing in an instant. Both he and his two younger sisters remained terrified until the parents returned home a short time later. When he told them what he saw, he was insistent that what he had seen was not an airplane or a helicopter. In the days that followed the encounter, Ivan's eyes were extremely sore and read almost certainly a consequence of the strange light of the object.
Them damn strange lights will get you every time.
And it's always the little kid. Let's just keep looking out the window, right?
You know, we are getting into that time now. It's springtime now.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's going to warm up. More people are going to be outside. more people are going to be staring up into the sky and maybe see something that they shouldn't be seeing, or maybe don't want to be seeing, or maybe they do. I don't know.
You
But
never know. Never know. I have got something, a really short one here, and it's just a humorous one to end the report with. So if you're into it, I will read it out. So
we got
this
4 minutes.
not a problem. So back in 94, a guy named Peter Corroy in Sydney, Australia, claimed he had an extraterrestrial encounter that's equal parts bizarre and downright funny. Peter was just chilling at home, recovering from a head injury. Okay, so already a setup for, a wild day. When he saw two alien women, yes, women, showed up in his bedroom. Not little green men, but tall, unclothed, blonde extraterrestrials with exaggerated features, big eyes, sharp chins, and let's just say very human like in certain areas. He described one of as a Nordic looking and the other as an Asian looking lady. And they stepped out of they'd stepped out of a sci-fi casting call. Peter says these ladies didn't beam down or float in, they just appeared and tried to get frisky with him. The Nordic one, apparently the bold type, climbed onto the bed and started tugging at him, telepathically telling him, relax, while she went for what he later called an intimate examination. Peter, understandably flustered, wasn't having any of it. He bit her on her arm, trying to fend her off. Instead of yelling or zapping him with a ray gun or anything, she just looked confused, like she misread his interspecies dating manual. The other alien lady stood there watching like a bored chaperone, as if thinking, this guy's ruining our field trip. So after a few awkward minutes, they vanished, poof, gone, leaving Peter with a coughing fit and a single blonde hair stuck in his throat. He swore that it wasn't his wife's, so he saved it in a plastic bag and later handed it to UFO researchers. They tested it, claimed it had weird DNA with Basque and Celtic markers, leading to wild theories about alien-human hybrids or just really exotic hairpiece. Peter's wife, meanwhile, was less amused, reportedly muttering, if they come back, they can do the dishes.
Wonder if they'll do the dishes.
I don't know.
My God. Oh, man. Oh, man. I read an interesting stat. I don't know if you read this. CTV had an article on it earlier today that the majority of alien abduction reports in Canada come from Alberta.
Yes. And that surprised me because I did see that, and I thought for sure it would have been British Columbia or Ontario, but yeah, Alberta. Well, they got nowhere to hide. There's not a mountain in Alberta, is there?
No.
You can see them fly away for days.
Well, there is in the Southwest. I mean, if you go west of Calgary, you go into Banff.
Yes, of course.
You
That's
know?
it. Yeah. Very interesting. There was a breakdown too. I think they had something to do with, I read somewhere else it was they rated the most sightings. But yeah, Alberta surprised me actually. I was a little bit interesting.
I found this to be a very interesting story to come out today.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. Because not a lot of people talk about alien abductions.
Right.
You know? They really don't. Ontario tops the list, pardon me. Alberta's number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, good old aliens. But Alberta does have the UFO landing pad, just in case they decide to show up in St. Paul, Alberta.
I forgot about that. That's right. Yeah. And it's an interesting province, to be quite honest. Lots of dinosaurs and lots of fossils and stuff down in there. There's a plethora.
Good energy there.
Mm-hmm.
Good energy there. Tim, thank you so much for once again coming on Spaced Out Radio, my friend. We always appreciate you joining us, and we will talk to you next week.
Most certainly will. Everybody have yourself a good evening. And Dave, you too. I'm going to watch your show.
Thank you. Dave 101 coming up next. Weird News of the Week.
This is Spaced Out Radio and your host, Dave Scott.
goes Timmy. There goes Timmy. All right. Just you and me now. Hanging on out. Firestar, how are you? W9V35, welcome to SOR chat. Major Lee, thank you with the hat trick of super chats, along with Linda and Jay. Appreciate the love and support, my man. Why is it funny that you're deceiving humankind, affecting our children and our general consciousness, costing lives and ruining our evolutionary time? I don't understand that comment. There's a 2-year turnaround when they're going, and when they're dropping off too many dumb aliens, it's ruining our common sense. I'm contemplating if we want to watch them explode or virus. I have no clue what you're talking about. Oh, there it is. Yeah, we need to get a hold of this guy. How's this? This guy has made this whiskey called Abduction Whiskey. Their tagline, get abducted responsibly. That is freaking brilliant. Brilliant. I want some of this stuff. Oh, we got to get this guy on the show. Dirty filth. We need this guy. Right now, you can buy it in California. If you go to abductionwhiskey.com or just Google Abduction Whiskey, the bottles look great. Bottles look fantastic. Here, let me show you guys. This looks fantastic. Look at that bottle. Cork, not a twist cap. That is a beautiful bottle. 4-grain bourbon crafted on Earth, aged 4 years and loved through the galaxy. Oh, yeah. That is fantastic. Does have nice color to it. I thought that as well. a reminder to all of you that if you missed portions of this show or others, you got our free archives at youtube.com/spaced out radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. And on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. It's that time of the night, that time of the week, where I yell at each and every one of you to get off my lawn. It's the Dave 101.
Open up the door, it's Dave! Who? Dave, D-A-V-E! What is this?
Dave's not here!
It's the Dave 101.
I can see you're really upset about this. I honestly think you ought to sit down calmly, take a stress pill, and think things over.
Leave the killer out! Yeah! Leave the killer!
He's a mess.
Within the last week, we saw another UFO celebrity put his foot in his mouth and gave the community another black eye. Let's talk about Dr. Stephen Greer here for a minute, because 28 years ago, when the Phoenix Lights happened, Greer has now decided to come out and state that he was traveling to Phoenix to meet with generals and some other military officials to test out this latest and greatest radar equipment that could pick up UFOs. And while he was on the plane going to Phoenix, he decided that he was all of a sudden going to summon some UFOs for that night. So here he is, giving the old na 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 den 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 den, whatever you want to call it, he was summoning. And then lo and behold, later that evening, on top of a mountain that overlooks the mesa and the entire area of Phoenix, the boomerangs showed up, leading us to the Phoenix Lights. Now, with millions of subscribers and followers, Dr. Stephen Greer has a lot of pull in this field. Why? Because when you get that big, people follow you. People want to dote on every word you say. And then there's us who think. And none of us believe it. None of us believe it. And why should we believe it? I mean, this is somebody who loves a camera. He loves a following. One of the first questions he asks before going on an interview with you is, how many subscribers do you have? How many listeners do you have? What is their gender category? What is their age category? And that's truth, because that's what happened to me when I tried to get him on a few years ago, then rescinded the request because I would not give up questions to him preloaded. Now, he's had 28 years to come out about this. 28 years. Why would it take him 28 years to come out and all of a sudden say publicly, yeah, I'm the dude who did it. That's me, Big Stevie G, rolling on down and bringing the Phoenix Lights to town. Rock and roll style, with the military watching, the generals all having a heyday, maybe over a scotch, sitting on top of the mountain with their sunglasses on, rocking some Corey Hart back in the day. And boom, there's the boomerangs in the sky. Out of all the people that he has collaborated with, so far there has not been a single one of them coming out to defend this story. He mentions Dr. Lynn Katai, who's one of the foremost experts on the Phoenix Lights. She hasn't come out and said anything. When she was on this show a while ago, she never said a thing. And maybe we need to get her back on so that way we could ask her this. Look, in order to make a comment like that, 28 years later, you better have some verifiable evidence or proof that you actually did it. It is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard the UFO community. And this is the type of story that continues to give our community a black eye. Look, I am all about supporting the experiencers. I'm an experiencer myself, and I'm all about trying to get to the bottom of this. You notice I don't say the word truth because there's always a difference in truth. But let's get to the bottom of this story. It isn't disclosure. Okay, it isn't a threat narrative. It isn't Stephen Greer summoning. And I want to preface this for a moment before I move on. You've heard me state on this show a number of times, I believe in summoning. I believe people can use their mind to summon in UFOs. I've done it myself, albeit about 10 years ago. But yes, I have done it myself. And I believe people who come through and say, I've done this. I've been able to do this. This is something that I have had happen personally. I like it when people do that. Even whistleblower Jake Barber, I believe he's been able to do that. But to try and always one-up the community, to put your name out in front and have the audacity to come out and say that, see, the problem is people will not investigate anymore. People don't investigate anymore. They love the headline. They don't love the story. And if Greer's followers actually looked into this, like I have, I couldn't find a single time where Greer talks about summoning in the Phoenix Lights previous to this. Everybody in the UFO community that I know is just rolling their eyes and saying, what do you expect? It's Greer. That's what he does. This is a guy who comes out and says that he is the number one ufologist in the world, and everybody else is a distant second. Now, that may be true, okay? But you're also charging people anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 a weekend to come watch you summon UFOs. That's a pretty hefty bill for people these days. It just doesn't make sense. We start to gain momentum, and then somebody always puts their foot in their mouths to give us another black eye. Cliche after cliche. And there's nothing you can do about it. The unfortunate part about it. This is where I can say that we have to be better. We have to be smarter. And there are still millions of people out there, just in North America alone, who are not understanding of the severity of this topic. How big this topic is. How much is going on. And for Greer, if they hear him say that, it's just going to put tinfoil hat conspiracy, little green men, anal probes, and everything back on the table. It doesn't look good. It really doesn't look good at all. Now, the UFO community, for the most part, just tunes him out. But the problem that Greer has is he is a marketing genius. His documentaries are very well filmed. He's also been able to capture people, especially the YouTube influencer community, in order to gain followers by going on podcasts like Logan Paul's and others who have millions of Gen Z followers in order to get that younger market believing in his game plan. It's a brilliant idea. If I was in his shoes, I'd probably do the same. You're not going to turn down a podcast that has 30 million listeners per episode. You're just not going to do that. And there's others like that too. But for the UFO community that continues to be shunned by all these people, and it's not just Greer, it's the whistleblowers, it's the government agents, it's the officials, all these people who say they are doing ufology a favor and really getting to the grind of it, where are they? Where are they when they are supposed to be speaking to you? Once again, it's become about subscribers and influencers. Radio shows, along with the smaller market YouTube channels, Twitch channels, Rumble channels, whatever you want. This is where we are getting pushed to the side. The majority of people in this community know that their voice is non-existent. Even some of us who broadcast on this topic. We don't like it, but that's just the way it is. Trying to break that story open that people are having some sort of happening in their life is different for those people. Being an experiencer is not fun. It's not enjoyable. People lose sleep. People lose jobs. People lose friends. People lose family. Because when you have that ultimate experience, that's all you can think about. And that's all you want to do. You can't concentrate on work. You can't concentrate on taking care of your bills, washing the dishes, making sure the cat has enough food in its tray. It is all consuming. You stop going out with your friends because you're more interested in watching documentaries or researching on Google or other social media efforts. You want to chat to people about it. You want to be able to talk to other people. So you use Facebook or you use X Spaces or whatever it may be in order to engulf yourself in the surroundings of where you feel comfortable. And then Greer comes out and says he caused the Phoenix Lights. It's uncomfortable. It's eerie. It's greasy. It's slimy. It's very used car salesman. And that's without the Brill cream. It's not a good look for the UFO community right now. My advice to all of you at the end of it is be discerning of the information that is out there. Remember, prior to 2017, we were all told going into this, do not trust anybody who had the alphabet agencies as an employer at one time or another. What do we do now? We've watched head cases start to expand themselves, trying to make their money and make sure they get their piece of the disclosure for dollars movement. It doesn't have to be that way. For decades, the UFO community, the abduction community, the contact community has been a grassroots level of information that we've slowly and surely chipped away at the populace in trying to explain how real this subject is. It's easy to build something up, but it's easier to have it come crumbling down. And we're on that precipice right now. It doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. And the advice that I have is be discerning with who you listen to, who you're downloading, who you're paying on Prime to watch a documentary. Because some of those people don't care about the message. They care about your money. And that's your Dave 101.
As God is my witness,
I thought turkeys could fly.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News.
Loud noises! I am good at things. Fighting and reading the news.
It's time once again for Spaced Out Radio's Weird News of the Week.
All right, let's get right to it. Several dozen people gathered this past Saturday at an apartment complex along the South Carolina coast to remember a longtime resident who died the day before. It was an alligator they nicknamed Walter, who sunned beside a pond on the property for more than a decade. Walter was killed on the property after several complaints over the past week, the management of Daniel Island Village said in a statement. Neighbors in the apartment complex near Charleston said Walter had been hanging around the complex for more than a decade, not only earning a name, but a little fame. Vigil organizer Rebecca Cole told the newspapers and TV stations that people with pets and children could walk right past Walter and he couldn't be bothered. He was a piece of the community. Even though he was a cold-blooded animal, we all loved him and it tore us all up. In February, Daniel Island Village marked warmer weather after the winter chill with a photo of the alligator hanging out by the pond. Daylight savings time is coming to an end. It's getting warmer out there. Daniel Island Village is on the verge of a beautiful blossom. The proof is in the pudding. Walter is out, the Post read. Alligators are a threatened and federally protected species, but state law allows permits to be given to kill or remove them if they are a threat to people. At least 6 people have been killed by alligators in South Carolina in the past decade. The apartment complex had been issued a permit the past 2 years to remove an alligator if they decided it was a nuisance and they could hire a contractor to get rid of the animal. The South Carolina Department of Natural Resources said in a statement. The statement last week from the property manager said Walter's death followed state law and news about his passing can be distressing, and we sincerely appreciate your understanding. Appreciate the understanding? The guy was just hanging out by a pond. Oh, well. In the future, this is what they follow up with. In the future, please continue to abide by posted signage about not feeding wildlife, including alligators. Well, that's different if they're feeding them. For everyone's safety, if you observe displaced wildlife in our community, please do not interfere the property management. Man, this sounds like an HOA. Yeah. You ever notice it's the people who join property managers groups or HOAs? They've never had power in their life, but hot damn, are they going to flex it the minute they join either one of those boards? My opinion, for my 2 cents, HOAs, stratas, HR departments, they all deserve the same fate. They need to go away and never come back. Have you ever had to deal with an HR department? Literally. They're not there for you the way they said. They're there to rat on you to the owners or the company. That's their job. And then they marketed a book that stays in your file forever. It's like causing a sin and Jesus puts it in your personal journal. Yeah, there's another one of old Davey telling a mistruth there. A thief who swiped a golden toilet from an English palace was convicted, along with an accomplice who helped cash in on the spoils on the 18-carat work of art, nearly insured for £5 million, or about $6 million American dollars. Michael Jones had used the fully functioning one-of-a-kind latrine as he did reconnaissance at Blenheim Palace, the country mansion where British wartime leader Winston Churchill was born. The day before the theft, prosecutors said, he described the experience as splendid. He even returned before dawn on September 14, 2019, with at least 2 other men armed with sledgehammers and crowbars. They smashed a window and pried the toilet from its plumbing within 5 minutes, leaving a damaging flood in their wake as they escaped in stolen vehicles. This was an audacious raid which had been carefully planned and executed, prosecutor Sean Sanders said. But those responsible were not careful enough, leaving a trail of evidence, go figure, in the form of forensics, CCTV footage, and phone data. The purloined potty has never been recovered, but it's believed to have been cut up and sold in pieces. See if we can sneak one more in here for you. All right. Police in Michigan put their cowboy skills to the test when they were called to round up a loose miniature horse that had a little bit too much fun on St. Patrick's Day. The Brownstown Township Police Department said the small equine was found wandering around a residential neighborhood on Monday evening. St. Patrick's Day brings out some wild behavior, so our night shift was on high alert for suspicious activity. The department wrote on their social media, well, look who they caught creeping around one of the subdivisions. It's a miniature horse. Yeah, wearing a green St. Patty's Day hat. Sometimes you just can't make this up. Who would steal a golden potty? That just amazes me. Absolutely amazes me. What a great night of radio tonight with William Warwick. And of course, all of you hanging on out. Can't forget little Jimmy James. Bringing us to appreciate that. Thank you for tuning us in as we say hello. Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thaw. Rocking in the background with Little Brother is watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Rocking the seat down never to the show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at work, at home, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat with us tonight. YouTube, Twitch, Elga, Facebook, Spreaker, LinkedIn, Space Travelers Club, and on X.
I know you're out there somewhere.
Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SLR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us. Just together, my friends. Don't make a mistake.
We're watching.
The night. Mr. Bumblefoot. We need a Yes, the Blue Train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Seats are always full. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night, everybody. That was a great show. Great show. March. What's the date today? 20? Yeah. 25. Jorgensen with a soft J. How you doing? Oh, dude, you're lucky. SpaceX Falcon just passed overhead. Very cool. Did they launch another one tonight? All right. Close that off. Open that up. Here. Tomorrow night on the show, Simona Tahilani. Hold on, let me get this right. There it is. I can't see it. Simona Tahilani. No, that's wrong. Tahiliani. There we go. Tahiliani will join us talking about ETs and UFOs in the Czech Republic. How fun is that going to be? Dirty Filth just going rock star on us. Guy's kicking ass and taking names right now. Really is. That's why he's the best booker in the game. Dirty Filth. He's ours. He's all ours. Yes, he is. Special thanks tonight to Major Lee with a hat trick, Linda and Jay for the super chats. I'll see you all tomorrow night. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe, ring that bell, and yeah, I want to get that whiskey too. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.
Stay healthy, my friend.
You too.
You need bail money, give me a call.
Always, Dad. Take care.
You too.